All across the military, suicide is a large problem that we have, and one suicide is too many. And although there is 1 month set aside for suicide prevention awareness, it is always, always on our mind. Stick with us. You're listening to the Fort Polk Podcast. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whenever you are listening to this podcast, I'm Jeff England, and with me today is Christa Zayas from the Suicide Prevention Program. She's actually the manager. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever we're listening to this.
Good day. Thank you so much for having me here.
It's great to have you in. Thank you for coming in. This is a serious subject, and I have and I'm not a very serious person. I can get serious at times, but this is one subject that I actually take to heart, and I think that one suicide is too many, and we need to help as many as possible. We're not going to be able to get out there and help every single person, and we will never be able to stop it from happening, stop.
Right. We'll never get
completely
right.
Stop it. But we can look for the signs. We can help when we can. So you have a program over at your office here on Fort Polk. People are allowed to come over and see you, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You're in building 4275?
Yes, sir. 4275 over on the airfield.
Oh, over on the airfield.
Where we're located. And so I would like to talk a little bit about the program. So the program is actually an initiative at Fort Polk specifically.
So we are special.
We are.
It's a quality of life stuff.
Absolutely. So the CG's been great about getting behind this and making sure that, like you said, one is too many, and making sure that we recognize what are those warning signs. So SafeTalk is designed for ages 15 and up to attend. So we can even do this at middle school, high school, which I think is a wonderful thing, right? Because our teens also struggle. It's not just an adult thing, right? Suicide doesn't discriminate on age, race, religion. It can affect all of us. So making sure people are trained in SafeTalk, I think, is a great thing that we're doing here at Fort Polk. So SafeTalk is suicide alertness for everybody. And the talk is the tell, the ask, listen, and keep safe. So the tell is the warning signs. What are we looking for? What are we watching for? How do we recognize it? How do we ask the question specifically? Are you thinking about suicide? And then listening to what they're struggling with, what they're going through. And then the keep safe is who can we bring them to as far as resources are concerned to get them the help they need.
Now, there are a lot of different resources available, some more known than others. And but one of the ones that I've always thought was a great resource to go to is the chaplain.
Absolutely.
Because, a lot of this, is rather to some embarrassing to have these thoughts or they feel that nobody listens and nobody's going to be there for them. It's just beyond control and all that stuff. And they don't want to go to somebody that will report it back to their chain of command.
Right.
Because back in my day, in the military, that was people were getting kicked out because they had suicidal thoughts, but not so anymore.
Correct.
That has changed, and the stigma of seeking out help they've tried to lift it because it's really no longer there. But people like the old school people like me, we still have that thought process, and so some people are less likely to go out and look for help. So the chaplain, since they have that confidentiality, and unless there is a specific threat or if immediate threat, I don't think they're supposed to be reporting back. So it's kind of personal or confidential.
Right. So chaplains are a great resource. And like you said, so chaplains, even if there is an immediate threat, they are confidential. So they do have that confidentiality. And majority of chaplains don't take record or notes. So whatever you tell them, it stays between you and that person unless you give the chaplain permission to say or talk to somebody else about it, right?
Yes.
So, and I think one little misconception I think a lot of people have is you have to be religious to go talk to the chaplain. And
no,
you do not, right? So I think our chaplains we have such...
They're great guys.
They are. We have some amazing chaplains here at Fort Polk, and they truly care about the well-being of not just our soldiers, but our family members as well, our civilians. So I would highly encourage people to seek out the chaplains. If
And you
you're
really
struggling.
can talk to them about anything you want.
Absolutely.
And they're always happy to talk to people.
Of course they are. Yes.
Get them up on their pulpit.
That's right.
But other resources, mental health can help.
Yes. So we have behavioral health at BJAC, which is a great resource as well, or your embedded behavioral health, within your units. Some units have those. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is also one that I highly recommend, especially if you're worried about that stigma of, it getting back to your chain of command. The National Suicide Prevention Crisis Line, they just recently changed their number. So they have a 988 number now, which makes it a lot easier to remember. So you can text or call 988. So I like to tell people it's kind of like 911, but 988 is that crisis line for suicide prevention.
Yeah, we've come a long way from the rotary dials. I mean, nine used to take forever to dial.
Right.
It's like...
Yeah, that's right.
And so we've got SafeTalk. SafeTalk is your program and you said it's unique to Fort Polk.
So it's a Living Works program, actually. And Living Works also does a program that the Army used to do, which is also ASSIST, which is an intervention program. And SafeTalk, we've transitioned to SafeTalk because it's a 2 to 3 hour program instead of a 2-day program. So it gives the units a little bit more flexibility to be able to get their folks in and get them trained in 3 to 4 hours, rather than 2 days. But it is a program that specifically Fort Polk is doing. Every soldier who comes through in-processing receives the training. We're starting to incorporate it into our civilian in-processing as well, so that way our civilians are also receiving it. And then if for some reason any of our FRGs or family members or units want to train the family members, all they have to do is reach out to myself, and I would be more than happy to set up those dates and get them trained as well.
Well, that sounds great. And you have on our website, there's phone numbers. And we can, so anybody that's looking for information can go to home.army.mil/polk and find all the information they need there, in addition to going over and visiting Christa over at Building 4275. And she's there Monday through Friday.
Monday through Friday.
During normal work hours, so you can go over there. Bother her at lunch. That's when she's...
Yes, that's when I prefer it. Absolutely.
But so we've got... I've heard all kinds of stories, and I do have a story that I'm going to share in a little bit, but there are some myths about suicide that just aren't really true. And it's like one of the ones that I truly believe is the myth that you could see it coming. Although that is true on most cases, some cases you just can't see them. Somebody that's set on it will hide it very well, and it'll come out of the blue. And it's like, and then after the fact, that's when you start saying, "Oh well, I should have known. I should have known that." What are some of the myths about suicide?
Right. So that's actually a great one, and I would love to start with that one. So we refer to those as impulsive suicides, and those are the ones that we say we didn't see coming. There were no warning signs. There was nothing we could have done to help that person. And while that does happen, I'm not going to say it doesn't. It is very rare that those happen. A lot of times people do display those warning signs. It's just they're very cautious on who they display them to or who they show them to.
Yeah. Now, when you say impulsive, I'm going to assume that it's some kind of really bad incident, like breaking up with your girlfriend, breaking up or getting a divorce, maybe a car accident or something, or family death, or friends,
absolutely.
Something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So another big myth that a lot of people have are only depressed people suicide, and that's not the case. Like you were saying, people can go through hardships and struggles in their life, such as a divorce, a loss of relationship, UCMJ action. We see a lot in the military, legal action, and that gets somebody in a really bad bad space. And rather than seeking the help that they need, unfortunately, they choose to take their life. And one thing, we do talk about in SafeTalk is, what if you do everything you can to help the person, but they still go through a suicide? Is that your fault? And I want to let people know that 100% it is not your fault, that you did what you could, whether you knew it or not. And of course, we all, as human beings, I think, have that sense of guilt when somebody suicides, right? What could I have done differently? What should I have done differently? Maybe I should have called them. Maybe I should have done this. And that's just, I think, the struggle that we have when it comes to suicide is it's so unpredictable, and it's, we have a hard time understanding it.
It's devastating.
Absolutely.
It's devastating to those that know you, that are related to you. I mean, anytime I think about it, I always thinking about my mom, my dad, my family, my friends. I feel my pain might be done and over, but what about theirs? It seems like I'd just be transferring all of my pain and guilt over to them, and I don't think that's fair.
Yeah. That's one thing with suicide too, is a lot of times, and this is one of the things we talk about more so in like an intervention model, but I like to refer to somebody who's struggling with suicide as having blinders on. They can't see what's out there. They can't see those resources. The only thing that they're focused on is what's happened to them, or what they're going through and what they're struggling with. And truly, people who ultimately go through with suicide, or even some of the suicide survivors I've spoken with, they thought truly that they would be better off and that everybody around them would be better off without them. And that was what brought them to that idea.
The other thing that I've always heard is that, but no one can really prove it other than the survivors, are the last thought that person does or has before they commit, or as they commit suicide, is, oh no, this is a mistake. And that's been, the only way that's been confirmed is by the people that weren't successful at it.
Right.
Now, and that says a lot. That says a lot. To have a permanent answer for a temporary problem. I'm not saying that suicide is not an answer, because it is. I mean, 2 + 2, what's the answer? 5. That's an answer. It's the wrong answer, but it's still an answer.
Right.
There's just so many better ways to deal with the problems that you're going through, especially in today's environment. There are so many places you can go to help, to get help. There's so many opportunities for you to help somebody else. Don't, just because you're having a problem doesn't mean somebody else hasn't had that same problem or a similar problem. And they can help you out just by sharing the experience with you. It's like, hey, you're not alone.
Right, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important to get out there and talk about it. There's a big stigma when it comes to suicide and talking about suicide. And I understand. And, thankfully, I think as a culture, we're lowering that stigma, right, by talking about it. But of course, we still have it. So getting out, sharing your story, checking in on people, and making sure that they know what resources are available.
Now, there are other problems. Depression is one of the factors of suicide. It's not the only one, and it doesn't have to be present, but some people do suffer from depression, and that can lead to those thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's help for that too.
Yes,
there's better living through chemicals, or better living through pharmaceuticals. I mean, you can see a doctor, you can get some help, you can get some counseling, and they can actually help out with some kinds of medications that can help that chemical imbalance that's in your brain, that's not letting go of these bad thoughts.
Right. Absolutely.
So, I mean, there are plenty of ways to help. And until you've gone through every single way, by the time you get through all of them, the time's passed.
Right.
And it's like, oh, wow, wait a minute. I'm over it. This is great. Now, and there's a lot of different ways. I mean, they say there's plenty of ways to skin a cat, but I'm still trying to figure out how many ways do you need. But the same with suicide. So what are some of the lethal, or let's go with the safety. The lethal means safety.
Yeah. So one thing we like to talk about, especially during Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, is lethal means safety. What does it mean to be or have a lethal means safety plan, right? So making sure that your weapons, if you have weapons at home, they're not loaded, right? Some people would say, oh, well, that's pretty common sense, right? But it's not. A lot of times people do keep those weapons loaded. And when you hit a crisis and you have access to lethal means that's readily available, it can become that impulsive suicidal act, right? So making sure that our weapons aren't loaded, that they are in a safety box, or that they have a trigger lock on them, it just makes it allows there to be one additional step in place to get somebody to actually think about what they're about to do before they do it. Also, medication. BJAC has a disposal box. So if you have expired medications, extra medications that you don't need anymore, take that out of your house and go put it in the disposal box. That way it's not even a thought. It's not present, right? We're kind of making our homes and our spaces safer because of those reasons.
Gotcha. Put the GFI in the bathroom and leave the toaster in the kitchen.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, the guns thing, especially with the military. I know a guy several years ago who was deployed over to Afghanistan, and they had to have their weapons on them all the time and loaded all the time. Mm-hmm. And this guy gets a note or gets a letter from his wife or girlfriend or wife, and says she's breaking up with him. She's gone. She's out of there. And this was supposedly the love of his life. And he got this note, and I don't know what else was involved with the note, but he became suicidal. Mm-hmm. Straight up. There's no doubting it. But he wasn't going around telling people. He was just depressed. He horribly depressed. He making little comments here and there, saying, "No, this sucks. I'm not going to get over it." And he was in his room with his bunkmate, and his bunkmate noticed that he wasn't in his right mind, and so it was like after his shift, and he was really down in the dumps, and he went in to go take a shower. And while he was in the shower, his bunkmate took his gun and removed the firing pin.
Yeah.
And just left it at that. Because he felt that if he wanted to talk about it, he would, but he's going to remove the impulsiveness ability. And time went on. Not very long, like maybe he got out of the shower and he said, "Okay, I'm leaving it." He gets out, and when his bunkmate returns to the room, he confronts him and says, "Did you take the firing pin out of my gun?"
Yeah.
He's all,
"How'd you know?
How did you know that the firing pin?"
Yeah.
And that's when he broke down.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, because I tried shooting myself.
Right.
And it didn't work.
And the weapon misfire didn't work.
And basically he survived. He got the help he needed. His friends saved his life.
Absolutely.
And it was a temporary problem because he went on to find a loving wife, to get married, have children, and all of that would not have been possible if his friend did not just interact with him and just take one little step. Just follow that gut feeling that he saw something was not right and it was going too far, but his friend didn't want to talk about it.
Right.
So I mean, it's not always about getting somebody. Are you suicidal? It's not like just flat out asking them, even though that could possibly work. Honestly, I can't see it working. If somebody was to ask me, I would deny it. Absolutely. Nope. Are you suicidal? No. Are you thinking about it? Nope.
So, one, round of applause for that soldier for recognizing and having that gut feeling, like you were saying, that something just isn't right, and taking that additional step to, hey, maybe I'm wrong about this, but let's see where this let's see where this goes, right? By taking that firing pin out. And then I like how you said that if, you're having thoughts of suicide, if somebody were to ask you, you would just flat out deny it. And one of the things we do talk about is that if somebody is struggling with suicide, there is a chance that they might not tell you. And it could be for a number of reasons. It could be that you're just not the right person that they feel comfortable telling. It could be that they're not ready to talk about it just yet. But if you have that gut feeling that something is still wrong, we like to say that when you ask, you don't just flat out ask. You list the reasons why you're asking. Hey, I've noticed a change in your behavior. I've noticed that you've been making comments, such as, I don't think I could do this anymore. And this is why I'm asking you. It's because I care about you. And that usually kind of allows that person to really process it, and it's not a cold ask. Whereas if I were to just go around and ask everybody, hey, are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about suicide? They're going to look at me like, oh, well, here comes Christa.
I am now.
Right. Here comes Christa. She's going to ask you about suicide. And as soon as you say no, she'll leave you alone, right? It's not effective. So we want to be effective in asking and how we ask. So that's why, especially with SafeTalk being here at Fort Polk, it's teaching those soldiers and civilians and family members, how do I go about asking somebody if I feel like something is really going on?
It is. I mean, and the sad thing is, some of the training that I've been through, they tell you just flat out ask them. It's like, and I look at them with the strangers. It's like, no, right. They're going to shut down.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's first of all, it's a yes or no answer. No, boom, we're done.
Right.
And but the way you explained it just now, it's a lot. That would get me thinking. That would sit there like, well, yeah, I have been doing stuff like that, haven't I? That would get me to think about it a little bit more than just denying.
Than just flat out asking.
Yeah, that's just slamming the door. No. Nope. Can't. Hi, I'd like to talk to you about that. Nope.
Right.
Thank you. Have you thought about buying a subscription to? Nope. Bye. But there are all kinds of help, and I think the best help out there are the people that are with you the most. They don't have to be your friends. They don't have to be your family. It's just somebody that you're around a lot, like coworkers and teammates and stuff like that, that know what you're normally like on a normal day, and when they see something different, just takes a little. Sometimes it just takes somebody to notice. Right. I've heard people that are. It's like nobody notices me, nobody listens to me. I don't matter. And those people, you can actually notice when things like that start happening. They're withdrawn. They're unattentive. They're unsupport. Well, they don't participate as much, or
not
they
motivated anymore.
Yeah, they retract into themselves. Right. And when you notice somebody that's usually an extrovert automatically, or all of a sudden turn into an introvert, that's kind of a warning sign. Yeah, it might not be as bad as the worst case scenario, but it's worth talking to.
Absolutely. And I tell folks too that it doesn't always have to be about suicide. They could just be having a bad day, right? We all have bad days. I know I do.
I don't. No. Every single day of mine is a wonderful day.
Perfect.
Living the dream.
Living the dream here at Fort Polk, right? But reaching out and just, like you said, talking to people and say, hey, I've noticed, you're usually really outgoing and now you're just kind of in a funk and you're by yourself and what's going on? Just having that conversation.
That happens. That used to happen to me a lot because I used to be the really hyperactive jokester that likes to make everyone laugh and all that stuff. And then one day I come in, I'm tired. Because
people are like, what's going on?
Are you okay? Are you feeling okay? It's like, yes, I'm just tired. Leave me alone.
Right. But they're caring because they're checking on you.
Well, right? Either that or they're expecting their daily dose of Jeff. So we've talked about some resources. The SAFE program or a SafeTalk program is one. One of them. Chaplains are another. We've got some hotlines. Do we have a hotline here local to Fort Polk?
So local to Fort Polk, we have like our behavioral health line numbers. We have Military One Source who can connect you with any resources here locally at Fort Polk once you give them an idea as to where you're at. And Military One Source is one of those also great connections too, where let's say you're not comfortable seeing a counselor on Fort Polk. They can refer you to some counselors on the civilian side. So you can get seen, I think it's 10 free sessions is what you're authorized through Military One Source.
Nice.
So that's always another great resource. We do have like a Fort Polk domestic hotline because as a lot of people know, domestic abuse or may not know, domestic violence is one of those things that also can contribute to suicide as well. So reaching out to the domestic hotline number, which is 337-424-7494. You can reach out to them if you're, having any type of domestic issues, and they can help you out with that as well.
And it's funny that you bring that up because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Yes, sir.
So that might go hand in hand. And,
absolutely.
There is always a number, and that number sounds like a cell phone. So I imagine that they're going to be manning that or available to answer that phone call 24 hours a day.
Right. Also, what we have the MFLACs, Military Family Life Consultants or Military Family Life Counselors, and a lot of units have their own MFLAC assigned to that unit. The nice thing with MFLACs is, again, soldiers, it's for soldiers and family members. So, and civilians, if you need to go talk to somebody, our MFLACs are also very outgoing, just like our chaplains. They're very personable, and they're civilians too. So sometimes that makes our family members more comfortable seeing a civilian rather than seeing a green suitor because they feel like they can understand them a little bit better.
Yeah. The things that I see, I forgot what I was going to, I had a thought in my head and it just left my thought or left my head.
Left the brain.
But now you can call if you have a problem. The way I look at it is the suicide prevention hotline. I mean, that to me, it just seems like that's the last thing somebody would want to do because it's like, okay, now I'm ready to do it. I need to talk to somebody immediately. So they call that. Is that true? Or can you say, I'm starting to have these thoughts and then call?
Absolutely. So you don't have to be at a breaking point or at that ultimatum of, this is my last chance to stay alive. If you're even just having thoughts of suicide or kind of struggling and, you're just not sure if life is worth living for or not, you're trying to contemplate what you want to do. Calling the suicide prevention hotline, they have people who are trained who can talk to you and find out what's going and then also help point you in the right direction as far as resources are concerned as well. So they are very well trained. They do know how to handle a lot of different situations. And so it's not just, well, now I'm suicidal, so now I'm going to call. But if you're just struggling in general, it's an additional resource for you to reach out to.
Now, the policies, the military policies, I've been told they've changed from the time that I was in. If somebody's having some kind of thoughts or problems or just needs to talk to somebody and they go to behavioral health or they go and seek some counseling, what kind of backlash are they going to get within their career?
Zero. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is one of those other big myths and stigmas out there that, well, I can't talk about it or talk to anybody about what I'm struggling with because the minute that my command finds out, I'm going to get demoted. I'm going to get kicked out of the military. I'm going to lose my career and my job. And that is not the case.
Which would just make it worse.
Right,
make
absolutely.
the whole thing worse.
Yeah, so now you have somebody who would be struggling already that is trying to seek help, and now you're adding one additional stressor on top of their life, right? Now they don't have a job, they don't have their career. So no, that is not the case here. If you reach out and get help, we're going to make sure that you get the help that you need, right? I like to refer to it as, think of it as maintenance. We all do maintenance on our vehicle, and nobody bats an eye, right? You have to get an oil change, you have to rotate your tires, you have to put fuel in your car, otherwise it's not going to work. If you need help with something, regardless of what it is, if it's behavioral health or mental health, if you're struggling with any type of an addiction, drugs or alcohol, if you reach out and get the help that you need, it's servicing. We're servicing you as a person as a whole to make sure that you are healthy and you can stay in the fight.
Kind of like a sick call.
Kind of like sick call.
I mean, nobody bats an eye over going to sick call.
Right.
Nobody bats an eye going to a chiropractor, right, or the dentist.
Right.
Especially the dentist. Come on.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
You gotta have a toothbrush or a teeth brush.
I mean, I would
it should
hope
have been called that.
Yeah, it should have been called teeth brush, right?
Yeah.
I would hope that you would brush your teeth.
Yeah. I mean, that's
stuff.
maintenance.
Yeah, it
and
is.
And nobody bats an eye over that.
Not at all.
They expect it.
Right.
So I mean, we still got work to do on the stigma.
We do.
And it's just it's funny how it used to be so different than it is now. I mean, back in the day, no one talked about it. No one, all
Right.
this, and now you've got like actors and actresses in Hollywood saying, "Oh yeah, my my psychiatrist," and I see, and it's like, okay, nice to know.
Right. And one thing I think too, I've seen in my career as well. I was also active duty military for a long time, and one of the things I really enjoyed seeing were some of our commanders, our sergeants major, actually getting out in front of their formations and telling them, hey, I've been to a counselor before, or I have been to behavioral health and mental health, and I've made it as a battalion commander, as a brigade commander, because your soldiers are looking up to those ranks, right? Ultimately, that's kind of what a lot of them are striving for. And if they know that their leadership is open about seeking help and that they've done it themselves and they didn't get kicked out of the military and there were no repercussions for them, I think our soldiers are more likely to go seek out that help than if it's, as you said, like, it was kept behind closed doors back in the day. Nobody talked about it. So I always encourage, command teams, platoon leaders, squad leaders to get out there and talk to your soldiers and just be honest with them and open and have those conversations.
Yeah. Now, going back to the myths that I know that there's a lot of them, and one of the ones that I actually joke about, and it's if you talk to somebody about suicide, you're going to put the thought in their head.
Oh, yes.
My favorite joke is you go to the suicide training or the suicide prevention training, and you sit there, especially after years of going to the same training in and out. It's like, all right, now we're going to treat you to train you to prevent it. And it's like, now I want to do it. Right. Come on.
Right.
But that's, that's just, that's one of my jokes, but it's just the myth of, just simply talking about it is going to put the idea in somebody's head.
Yeah. So that's actually another one that we talk about during SafeTalk. is
Man, I'm just hitting all the
you're
points.
hitting all the points today. You are on it.
You didn't know I was so knowledgeable on this, did you?
So one of the things we talk about in SafeTalk when we train our soldiers is that, well, a lot of the myth is, well, I don't want to ask them about suicide because if I ask them now, they're going to have thoughts of suicide. I don't want to talk about suicide because if I talk about it, they're going to have the thoughts of suicide. And one of the examples I like to give folks is, well, if I know that you have $1 million and I come and say, will you give me your $1 million?
Now I'm thinking about.
Are you going to think about giving me your $1 million?
Now it's in my head. It's
right.
like, well,
and now you're going to give it to me.
The
right?
answer is no.
Right. Exactly.
I'm always going to say no.
Right. So, human beings aren't that simple, right? We're not as simple as soon as I ask you something, I'm just going to automatically put that thought in your head.
Well, some people are, but.
Well, that's a conversation probably for another day, right? But most people are not going to have the thought. I've had soldiers that have said, well, I asked and they said no, and then a week later they had thoughts of suicide. It wasn't because you put that thought in their head. It was because that thought was already there. It just, like we said,
they lied.
Yeah, it was like we said before, they just weren't ready to talk about it with you, or maybe you weren't the right person for them to talk about it. But because you reached out and you asked, it got them thinking like, okay, maybe I am struggling and maybe I do need the help.
And people can see it.
Absolutely.
That's the big one. It's like, wow, you could see that?
Right.
Yeah, that's one of the big ones. Another one that I hear a lot is we're Army strong. We're tough people, and suicide is for the weak.
Yeah, only weak people have thoughts of suicide.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Suicide's for quitters.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, obviously that is a myth, right? You are not weak for struggling mentally or emotionally with something that's going on. Again, I go back to preventative maintenance, right? We do it in the Army for everything.
Including brushing your teeth.
Including brushing your teeth. You have to take care of yourself. And if you are not taking care of yourself, then there is a chance that you're going to start going downhill and struggling with things.
And that hill can get pretty steep.
It can get steep fast, especially if you're not getting the help that you need.
And that comes up with preventive maintenance on your brakes.
Yes.
So you want to get the brakes fixed.
Get the brakes checked.
It all comes back to preventative maintenance.
Right.
So we've got that, and then there's another myth is that all suicides are come right out of the blue.
Right.
It's like you never see it coming.
Right. So that goes back to our impulsive suicide that we talked about before.
Well, that's already been proven wrong by the guy that I knew.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's somebody saw it.
Somebody saw something.
And that was a real intervention.
Right. Yeah. So it goes back to like what we talked about with the impulsive suicides. Nobody saw it coming. Studies have shown that most people will have warning signs. Most people will have hints or something that will clue somebody in that they're struggling with something. And it's just, as humans, we tend to sometimes overlook those because we tend to be focused on ourselves. We're too busy. We have stuff going on. Somebody else is going to take care of it, or even more so, we're struggling with our own things. And so we don't feel equipped enough to handle what somebody else is struggling with. So a lot of times we miss those signs. So I think the more we train and talk about it, the more we train people to become more suicide aware of what are these warning signs and how do we help those people.
Yeah. And the other one is people that are having those thoughts don't ask for help. And that's not true.
No.
If somebody comes up to me and asks for help, I'm gonna have to do something. Mm-hmm. I'm not just gonna sit there and I might not be able to do a lot, mm-hmm. but I can at least point them in the right direction. I can walk them to the hospital or a chaplain. I could take them someplace,
right.
Give them a ride to see somebody that can help.
Mm-hmm. And it would be so great if people just outright said, "Hey, I'm thinking about suicide. Can you help me?" Right? It would make life and our work here so much easier.
You'd be out of a job.
I would be, and that's not always a bad thing, right? But unfortunately, people who are struggling, they don't outright usually tell you, I'm thinking about suicide.
No.
So that's why I think having that training and making sure that people understand those warning signs, they understand what to look for, and then how to get them the help they need is very important.
Yeah, I've seen some warning signs like giving away your possessions.
Right.
Making plans that aren't normal.
Yeah. If you have somebody who's
the way you talk, the way you say goodbye to somebody, or just a cryptic message or voicemail or a phone call or something. Hey, you've always been a great person to me, and
I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah. Those kinds. Those are those you learn these signs
absolutely
in your training.
Absolutely. Yep. So those are some of the signs we talk about. And we also ask people for more examples so that way people can share from what they've learned over the years, or maybe something that they've experienced as well.
Yeah. It's a powerful subject, and we do need to do our very best to prevent as many as possible, get as many people the help they need as we possibly can. Mm-hmm. Let's just go over those resources again. Once again, you can get all of you can find out resources that you need at our homepage at home.army.mil/Polk. And you could just look around on there and find all kinds of resources. There's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, which is now a 988 number.
Yes, 988. Now, we still have the 1-800-273-TALK, so that number still is active, but they've just added that additional 988 number to make it easier for folks.
Oh, great. And then we've also got the chaplains on post, and once again, you can reach them or find out the information on our website. You've got your MFLEX, and those are embedded into all the different units.
Yes, so our units have some MFLACs, and then as well as if you are in a unit that maybe doesn't have an MFLAC or you're not sure how to get a hold of them, you can contact over at ACS.
ACS has them.
And they can put you in touch with an
And that's
MFLAC.
at Building 920. And finally, if somebody needed training, or if they needed to talk to somebody or some help or anything like that, they can call Christa Zayas.
Absolutely. Yes, I would be more than happy to take that phone call.
And her number is 531-6187 right here on Fort Polk. Yes, just like all the other phone numbers start with 531-337-531-6187. Talk to Christa. She's the Suicide Prevention Program Manager, so you know what you're talking about.
Yes.
Well, I'd like to thank you for coming in, Christa. I appreciate you being on the Fort Polk podcast, and everyone appreciates it here.
Thank you for having me.
All right. We'll see you next time. Well, we can't see you on a podcast, can we?
We can't.
So it's I'll be listening at you later. This is Jeff England, and you've been listening to the Fort Polk podcast. We are out of here.